Hey, it's George Anderson here from intelligentrunning.com, and thanks for joining me today, where I am hopefully going to help you understand a little bit more about one of the absolute critical elements of faster running. We're going to talk about threshold running, which is something you've probably heard me talking about before if you've been on my blog or you've downloaded my free blueprint of intelligent running, but it's something that is still very, very often misunderstood. And because of that, a lot of runners are leaving a lot of speed right there on the table because this is an easy way of getting faster. In fact, I put my hat in the ring and say this is one of the only ways of getting faster. When you're certainly a distance runner, half marathon, 10K, even 5K runners, you need to be doing an element of threshold running in your training. So let me explain first of all what it is, and then we're going to go through some of the methods with which we've got at our disposal at getting or increasing our lactic threshold. Let's take a look at this chart here. We've got heart rate up the side here, and we've got time, so this is a run down at the bottom. Right at the top here, remember this is heart rate, right at the top, this is your maximum heart rate. Now clearly we can't work any harder than that, so we're not worried about anything that goes above this graph, this line here. Down at the bottom here, we've got your resting heart rate. If here's 0, this might be 40, 50, or even 60 beats per minute. So this is your resting heart rate. Again, only a very small amount of work we can do to bring that down. Yes, sure, the fitter you get, the lower your resting heart rate is going to get, which is brilliant, but we're just interested in working between these two lines here. Now, your lactic threshold is the point at which your heart is working at exactly the same level of number of beats per minute to get rid of the lactic acid in your blood that's been accumulated with the exercise that you're doing. So if you're running and you're accumulating 100 units in a minute and your lactic threshold is getting rid of 100 units in a minute, then when you take your heart rate up to that particular heart rate there, you're getting rid of the lactic acid that's been produced by your body at the same rate at which you're producing it. If you go above that level, then you're going to get an accumulation of blood lactate, and that's a bad thing. Well, it's not a bad thing when you're training. You can use that to your advantage, but it's not a great thing if you want to sustain that intensity for any long period of time. Because as you get this accumulation of blood lactate, that's when you start feeling this overwhelming desire to slow down. You start feeling like your heart rate's just racing, your legs are feeling like lead, and you just don't feel like you have the same control anymore. So we don't want to, with the threshold running I'm going to describe now, we don't want to get above that line. What we want to do is to get onto that line with our runs. So let's draw it in there. I'm going to take it in quite close to the top here. Here we go. This is our lactic threshold, LT there. Now, this line here is different to the top one and the bottom one in that this one here we can do something about. Remember, there's not much we can do with resting heart rate. We can drop it a few beats per minute as we get fitter maybe, and there's definitely nothing we can do about maximum heart rate to increase it. But we can change lactic threshold here. By getting fitter, by improving our body's ability to deal with lactic acid, we can increase this line. We can shift everything up. And the higher this lactic acid line goes, this threshold line goes, the more space we've got here to work in. This is your aerobic zone here. This is where you're going to be doing most of your racing. Maybe 10Ks, possibly 5Ks, you're going to be racing at or around your lactic threshold there. But most other runs, longer distances, you're going to be in this aerobic zone. So if you can increase this, even by 4 or 5 beats per minute, by doing correct, smart training, then it means you can run at a faster pace and still be within that aerobic zone. So the long, slow stuff is important. The long, slow runs where you're coming in here, you're holding maybe 65%, you're holding it, maybe an hour or more, then you're dropping back down. This is all really important stuff here. So this is perhaps 65% of your maximum heart rate. The lactic threshold is normally somewhere between 80 and 90% of your max heart rate. For deconditioned runners, or runners just getting going, perhaps having not done any kind of exercise for some time, this may be as low as 65 or even 70% of your maximum heart rate. So it's just a little bit above this aerobic zone here. That's why we talk about the walk-jog principle for getting beginner runners into running. If you're very deconditioned, you walk a bit, you run a bit. Because even running at a low intensity is going to be enough to start accumulating lactic acid. If we can increase this, which is what we want to do, then the only way of doing that is by training at this intensity. So this stuff is important. Running aerobically, that's key as well. But what we really want to do is, with the threshold runs, get ourselves up. And during the session, we'll warm up exactly the same. Start off maybe 5-10 minutes here. So it's 10 minutes of easy running to begin with. Then we're going to spike up the intensity. We're going to take it up. We're going to increase our pace. And we're going to take it up so we get to this 80-85%, whatever our lactic acid, our lactic threshold is. We're going to come up and we're going to hold it there for maybe 8 to 10 minutes, and then we're going to drop back down again. We'll hold it here for a couple of minutes, then we're going to go back up, hold it along, we're going to come back down. We might do that 2, 3, or even 4 times. So we're accumulating time running at the lactic threshold. Now, we don't want to go too far above, because to go too far above is a valid training system, but not for what we want to achieve here. Taking it above that lactic threshold, all that's going to do is going to start increasing the amount of lactic acid that's in our body. We're not going to be able to sustain that for long enough to get the kind of benefits that we want from this. If you're doing 10Ks or 5Ks, then you're bound to have some form of interval training in your training program, minute, 2-minute runs, and in that time you definitely will be encouraged to take it up and go beyond this lactic threshold. You're into the zone, the lactic training zone, right up here, but then you're only going to be holding it for a short time. Back down, up. So this isn't what we're talking about when we talk about threshold running. Threshold running, we want to get to the line and not too far above it. So the benefits of doing that, remember, during the run, it's just going to hurt. You're going to feel it. It wants to feel like you're about 8.5 out of 10 on an intensity scale. So 1 is easy, 10 is super hard. 8.5 out of 10 is as much as it should get to. Okay, so it's going to hurt. But during the session, that's not where you get the results. You just have to push yourself through the workout. And it's after the session that you're going to start getting the benefits. During the recovery phase, in the next day or two after the threshold run, that's when your body starts to adapt to the training stimulus you've given it, and this line here starts to increase. This lactic threshold now goes, if it was 80 beats per minute, if it was 80% of max heart rate, now it might be up to 81% of maximum heart rate. Even a small increase in your lactic threshold means you're going to be able to chunk this line here up a little bit as well, your aerobic zone. So this is your comfortable pace. This might be your race pace, or it might be your 7 out of 10 long, slow training pace. Whatever this is, if you imagine being able to increase this, so instead of doing 12-minute miles, now you can comfortably hold 11-minute miles, then of course you can see that that's going to make you a faster runner. Just working and focusing on this area here, this intensity, the long, slow runs, is only ever going to help you run for longer distances at a slow pace. If you want to get faster, and most runners, certainly that's one of their goals, if you want to get faster, then you've got to be working up here at this intensity. One final point to remember is avoid working in this middle ground here, this no man's land, or the junk mile zone. In the junk mile zone, what happens is you're no longer getting the aerobic benefits because you're working a little bit too hard. You're starting to place demands on the lactic system, the lactic acid training system, energy system. But you're not quite working hard enough to really dominate through here and to get this system working powerfully enough to give you the adaptations that you want. So you're working too fast for aerobic training, and you're not quite working fast enough to get that lactic threshold effect. So you end up in this junk miles, and sad to say, that's where a lot of runners will find themselves, perhaps coming up to here, midway, maybe 75% of their max heart rate, and holding it there for perhaps an hour, 45 minutes to an hour, getting home again, feeling like you've had an incredible run, invigorating run, and hoping that you've managed to make yourself a faster runner because of it. But this goes on for week after week and month after month in many cases, and no real results are observed. So if you want to get faster, stick with this, add in the lactic threshold running as well, avoid too much running in the junk miles, and threshold running will be your very best friend. I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope that has cleared up a little bit about what threshold running is all about. I'm George Anderson, and I'll see you again next time.